All right, welcome back, everyone. I've got 1050 here. Let's go ahead and go to our next group of speakers who all happen to be from the wholesaler community. And the first of which is Anita Duca with HDA, that's the Healthcare Distribution Alliance. It's all yours, Anita.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, okay, great. Well, I'm Anita Duca. As Dan has said, I'm the Senior Vice President for Regulatory Affairs at HDA. We represent primary pharmaceutical distributors, the vital link between the nation's pharmaceutical manufacturers and more than 200,000 dispensers nationwide. Today, I'm pleased to discuss enhanced drug distribution security. Long before the DSCSA's enactment in 2013, we recognized the need to strengthen supply chain regulations, add uniformity, increase safety, bolster distributor licensure standards, and improve the identification of suspect and illegitimate products. We brought our concerns to Congress and actively participated in multi-year legislative negotiations that evolved into the DSCSA. Since enactment, we have continued our leadership role and undertaken enormous implementation efforts. Working with other stakeholders, we developed guidances, provided numerous educational offerings, and sponsored important initiatives around barcodes, electronic data exchange, exceptions handling, verification, and more. I'll now turn to the agency's Enhanced Drug Distribution Security Draft Guidance, or EDDS draft guidance, intended to facilitate the 2023 implementation, only 2 years away, and explain our significant concerns. We are concerned that the draft guidance, rather than facilitating implementation efforts, may actually hinder them. I and some of the other speakers today will address how inconsistencies between the draft guidance and industry's well-described compliance efforts may impede our shared goal of meeting the 2023 deadlines. Stepping back from the draft guidance's specifics, I cannot overstate the importance of achieving alignment between FDA's articulation and what industry has collectively been building over the past 8 years to meet the 2023 requirements. This is because while FDA issues the guidances, individual state regulatory authorities inspect wholesale distributors for compliance and license them. State regulators look to FDA's guidances for implementation and interpretation of the DSCSA's requirements. Thus, we anticipate that many states will rely on the draft guidance and expect that wholesale distributors will implement it as written. They often follow FDA guidances in this way, even though a guidance states it is draft or contains only recommendations or is non-binding. As others will also explain today, many of the compliance systems and processes they have been building in good faith and transparently are very different from what FDA appears to contemplate in the draft guidance. Many functionalities the draft guidance seems to expect are inconsistent with the statute and are not technologically or operationally feasible by 2023. At best, wholesale distributors may have to spend considerable time and effort explaining to regulatory authorities why their processes comply with the statute. At worst, wholesale distributors may be extremely vulnerable to non-compliance findings and enforcement actions if regulators believe the distributors should have implemented the draft guidance exactly. Moreover, the statute's complexity, coupled with the draft guidance's recommendations not aligned with the statute or what the industry has been building, can lead to other problems, such as varying interpretations across the states. We may find ourselves back to 50 different sets of state expectations. This patchwork is in contravention to the original intent of the DSCSA, a uniform national framework to enable DSCSA covered drug product tracing and help protect the domestic supply chain. I'll now turn to a few specific concerns about the draft guidance. As the distributors speaking today will describe, we found certain elements of the draft guidance to be particularly troubling, such as the statements that trading partners should be able to collect the relevant transaction information and transaction statement in a rapid electronic manner from all trading partners that were involved for a product being investigated. Or FDA would expect that federal or state officials would be able to initiate a single targeted request for information via the enhanced system. Taken literally, this language would indicate that FDA expects all trading partners will have visibility into other trading partners' proprietary transaction data through an apparent system-to-system interface, or that all supply chain transaction data will be available for querying from a central repository or interconnected databases. More recently, the agency appears to expect that all trading partners and all regulators would be connected to one another through a communications hub, as presented at FDA's prior webinar, the traceability seminar, and even earlier today. But the DSCSA does not require these repositories, connections, or functionalities. Instead, consistent with the statute, trading partners are building point-to-point, business-to-business connections that will enable sending and receiving transaction data, including the product identifiers for each product in a transaction. The verification router system, or VRS, may have inspired the apparent expectation of full visibility into all product transactions with a one push of a button. The VRS doesn't do this and cannot be repurposed for such requests and responses because the entire supply chain would have to participate in or subscribe to such a system for it to work as envisioned. However, only a limited number of manufacturers and wholesalers and even fewer dispensers currently participate. Also, the VRS is able to direct a query about a product identifier from one trading partner at a time to that product's manufacturer and provides a very limited automated response back about the product identifier. Yes, the product identifier matches one the manufacturer assigned, or no, the product identifier does not match one the manufacturer assigned. The VRS can enable a very few limited additional messages, such as whether a product with that identifier is the subject of a recall. But that's all. The VRS cannot broadcast a tracing request to all supply chain members and cannot return a complete collection of transaction data back. The system FDA appears to envision would seemingly involve a single query going to multiple interconnected data repositories and retrieving a tremendous volume of data. This is far different from and enormously more complex than the VRS system, which has taken about 5 years to develop. A communications hub poses other significant hurdles as we understand the intention. For example, we believe a single entity would have to build and operate this hub, and a requirement that every supply chain partner participates in it. But this communications hub is not statutorily required, doesn't exist, isn't being built, and cannot be built and operationalized by 2023. Even if an entity purports to have such a system, we see enormous antitrust risks if every trading partner was expected to participate. Therefore, HDA could not support industry-wide adoption of a single proprietary offering. HDA described many additional concerns about the draft guidance in our written comments to the docket, and we intend to follow up this meeting with supplemental comments. I'll close with a few recommendations regarding the EDDS draft guidance. First, we respectfully request that the agency withdraw the draft guidance. Otherwise, states may begin compliance activities based on it, even though it's still in draft. Moreover, it is generating uncertainty across the supply chain that is distracting from what we need to be doing, which is focusing on building connections between trading partners for interoperable transaction data exchange. Without data exchange, there will be nothing to trace in 2023. Second, in any rewrite, we urge focusing on what is specifically necessary for compliance. That means including the specific requirements and elements contained in the 2023 feature of the DSCSA and leaving out those not statutorily required. Exchanging the transaction information, including the product identifier and the transaction statement, and a trading partner's ability to respond to appropriate trading requests with the transaction data in its possession, comprise key 2023 requirements. Third, we urge the agency to expressly state that what industry is currently doing is interoperable and that the industry's overall preparations as communicated to the agency are compliant. By endorsing these efforts, FDA will signal to inspectors and regulatory authorities that we're on the right track. This clarity is also important because, as indicated by certain remarks we recently heard, some trading partners saw the communications hub in FDA's presentations and think there's something else coming. They're deciding to wait to commit to EPCIS, which is critical for both data exchange and tracing. But there isn't anything else. Currently, there's no other technology or solution except transaction data exchange using EPCIS standards. FDA's support for the supply chain's direction would provide the go-ahead that some trading partners are waiting for. HDA urges FDA to adopt our recommendations to help ensure patients' continued access to medicines and to support productive interactions between the supply chain and all regulatory authorities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this important meeting here today.
Great, thank you, Anita. Let's keep going, and I'll now turn it over to Marianne Nelson at Cardinal Health.
Great, thanks, Dan. Good morning, I'm Marianne Nelson, Regulatory Manager with Cardinal Health. We're one of the largest pharmaceutical drug distributors in the US. And the safety and the security of our nation's pharmaceutical supply chain is one of Cardinal Health's top priorities. And we appreciate the opportunity to share our preparations for 2023, as well as discuss our perspectives on the Enhanced Drug Distribution Security Draft Guidance. I'll start with our EPCIS onboarding efforts, then explain how we're incorporating serialized data into our receiving and shipping processes, and finish up with how we anticipate responding to tracing requests. In 2023, wholesale distributors expect to receive DSCSA serialized TI and TS from manufacturers via EPCIS. Using EPCIS for serialized data exchange is not new. We've been building system capabilities for this for well over 5 years now. Critical to achieving interoperability between trading partners is the use of GS1 standards for EPCIS messaging, 2D barcode format, and the lightweight messaging standard for verification. It would be helpful for FDA to endorse these standards as acceptable for 2023 compliance. As we saw in 2015, when manufacturers started to send DSCSA transaction data to wholesale distributors via the ASN 856, establishing connections between trading partners requires significant time, effort, and resources. To that end, Cardinal Health has asked manufacturers to send us aggregated serialized data via EPCIS 1 year in advance of the deadline, beginning in November of 2022. And we've made this request because it's important to allow adequate time for setup, testing, stabilization, and finally evaluating data quality. Cardinal Health expects to onboard approximately 500 suppliers with point-to-point connections. On average, it takes us 4 to 6 weeks to onboard a supplier. Initially, as data transmissions are reviewed, there can be a lot of back and forth regarding data format errors and appropriate corrective actions. Cardinal Health is ready now to receive serialized data via EPCIS, and we've been encouraging our manufacturing trading partners to start the onboarding process as soon as they are able to. We remain concerned, however, about EPCIS adoption. Currently, only 42 manufacturers are sending us serialized data in production. That's less than 10%. We believe FDA's support of EPCIS as a valid format for serialized data exchange would help improve the adoption rate. Moving to the receiving and shipping processes in our distribution centers, operationally, we plan to infer on receipt and scan on outbound. In 2023, wholesale distributors like Cardinal Health must receive the EPCIS serialized TI and TS from manufacturers prior to accepting ownership of the product. Cardinal Health has developed systems and processes to ensure the EPCIS messages received contain all the required DSCSA transaction data elements. The data received from manufacturers is stored in our serialization repository. Upon receipt of product at the dock, we will check in product first by matching the NDC, the lot, and the quantity of the physical product with the electronic data received. We'll then scan a representative sample of barcodes for every purchase order, NDC, and lot combination to ensure those serial numbers are included in the transaction data we received. And if they match, we intend to infer receipt of the remainder of the serial numbers. We'll note which serial numbers have been scanned versus which have been inferred, which will be helpful in future reconciliation efforts if needed. If data is not available or discrepancies are found, we will quarantine the product and contact the manufacturer to help resolve the discrepancy. It's important to recognize that while we will reconcile data, lot, and quantity discrepancies at receipt, we will not be reconciling individual package serial numbers at receipt. That will be done on outbound. To scan each package at inbound would significantly slow product receipt and would require additional warehouse space that we don't have, as well as increased staff. The Enhanced Drug Distribution Security Draft Guidance appears to expect purchasing trading partners to scan and reconcile both at physical receipt and shipment. We do not see added value in duplicate reconciliation efforts, and it seems to go against the use of aggregation and inference, which FDA indicates it supports as essential to trading partner operations. To us, the optimal place to scan and reconcile individual serial numbers is at outbound. We intend to scan every product identifier at pick. We'll scan at the case level if we're shipping a full case to the customer, and at the individual package level if shipping less than a case quantity. And we do this for two reasons. First, to ensure Cardinal Health has received the appropriate electronic TI for the item prior to sale. That's very important because we are using inference at receipt. Second, to capture the elements of that product identifier, the NDC, lot, expiration date, and serial number, and be able to associate it with the order and the customer who will be receiving the product. And just like with receiving, if a scanned serial number cannot be found in the repository, we'll quarantine it before shipment and contact the manufacturer to help resolve the exception. We're not currently scanning 2D barcodes at outbound, even though we've built the system functionality for it. Before we can do so, we need to invest in new 2D scanners for warehouse associates to use. And we are also budgeting for the additional resources needed to scan barcodes on every package at outbound. Outbound scanning is expected to increase labor a minimum of 12 to 15% based on recent time studies. As an example, an average distribution center with 50-person night crew, they would need to hire 6 additional people just to support outbound scanning, and multiply that by the 21 pharmaceutical distribution centers in the Cardinal Health network. And that's a significant increase in headcount just for outbound scanning. We plan to send TITS via EPCIS to downstream trading partners and or otherwise make the serialized data available to customers, most likely via a web portal. We expect that most smaller dispensers will not have system capabilities to accept EPCIS messages and instead would prefer to use their wholesale distributor as a solution provider so that they have the ability to receive, store, and access DSCSA transaction data. One point that should be clarified is that DSCSA requires the selling entity to include as part of TI the product identifiers at the package level for each package in that transaction. If shipping a sealed homogeneous case, the TI must include the product identifiers of the units that are inside of that case. The Enhanced Drug Distribution Security Draft Guidance appears to say that the seller does not have to send the unit level product identifiers as part of TI, that it would be acceptable to only send the case product identifier and have the purchaser look up the associated package data in a separate file. We do not see that as compliant with the statute and believe it should be removed from the guidance. And finally, on tracing requests, we agree with HDA's and PDSA's and others' views that the enhanced system for 2023 is not a single system. Interoperability is achieved between individual companies' decentralized systems. Cardinal Health will maintain serialized data for 6 years within our individual system, and we're building the reporting capabilities to respond to requests for information. For tracing, we do not envision regulatory agencies having direct access to stakeholder systems, nor is the concept of a centralized database where regulatory agencies could access all tracing information realistic. No such database exists, and it would be extremely complex to build. It certainly would not be available by 2023. Our expectation is that if FDA needs tracing data, they will ask us, and we will query our individual databases and respond with the TI and the TS in our possession, what we have received and what we have generated. And we believe that this response would meet DSCSA requirements. In closing, let me say that Cardinal Health, along with many other stakeholders, are well on our way to meeting DSCSA requirements in the timeline allowed. We have been developing systems and processes for compliance for years now. As written, some parts of the Enhanced Drug Distribution Security Draft Guidance appear to add provisions inconsistent with what the supply chain has been building to meet statutory requirements. And these will delay implementation of 2023 requirements and add unbudgeted costs. We do respectfully ask that the agency focus the guidance on core compliance obligations and not future enhancements. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Next, we have Scott Mooney with McKesson.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning. My name is Scott Mooney, and I'm the Vice President of Distribution Operations for McKesson Corporation. And for the past 8 years, I've had the honor of leading McKesson's enterprise-wide traceability effort. McKesson is a mission-driven company charting a course for better health. For over 180 years, 1/6 of those that I've been here, McKesson has led the industry in delivery of medicines and healthcare products. We deliver vital medicines, medical supplies, care management services, health information technology solutions that touch the lives of over 100 million patients in healthcare settings that include rural pharmacies, retail pharmacies, hospitals, physician offices, cancer clinics, long-term care facilities, and home healthcare. While we're traditionally known as a distributor, we're also a manufacturer of generic drugs. We are a third-party logistics provider offering services to manufacturers. We're a solution provider offering technology to manufacturers and to pharmacies, in addition to being a traditional distributor that most of you recognize us by. Similar to some of the comments that Mary Ann has talked about with Cardinal, McKesson has been building and developing their serialization system for the 2023 requirements now for about 5 years. It is a system that is central to McKesson and is for use of all of our business units as well as for our dispenser partners. And in some cases, we offer solution services on that platform to some of our manufacturer clients as well. The system is based on EPCS and uses GS1 international standards in that regard. And we view interoperability of the system with other systems as the exchange of messaging carrying the TI and the TS between the trading partners when a transaction occurs, and the ability to respond in a consistent manner when a tracing request may have been made. We believe that interoperability is key to recognize it is not one system or one platform, but rather distributed systems with each party holding their data and protecting the security and integrity of that data, and being able to exchange data with other trading partners when necessary under the law in a consistent manner. We've heard a lot of people so far this morning discuss about the need for EPCIS standards to be able to communicate the TI and the TS. I'm kind of going to join onto that bandwagon for a minute and recognize that EPCIS is the international standard that the industry has been using to prepare for 2023. We would ask that the FDA endorse that position that EPCIS will carry the minimum requirements of the DSCSA in an international manner according to standards and satisfactorily meet the DSCSA requirements. I want to switch gears here now for just a minute, though, and talk about something we've not yet discussed this morning, which is talk about tracing and some of the complications of tracing, particularly as they may apply to distribution and to distributors. We believe it's important to recognize that there's a difference between what a government official may be able to request of an authorized trading partner than what another authorized trading partner may be able to request when a tracing event occurs. Earlier in the discussion this morning, Ms. Kundi discussed briefly sections D and E in the DSCSA as it relates to tracing and talking about requests by the FDA or the Secretary or other regulatory agencies and the requirements to have to provide TI and TS as it relates to the transactions of the product identifier that's being queried. But Section E was not discussed in any great detail, but Section E, specifically 582 G1E, uses different language to discuss what happens when a trading partner makes a request for tracing as opposed to when a regulator may make a request for tracing. If you look at the language between the two sections, Section D talks about the need to provide the TI and the TS to a regulator when they make a tracing request. Section E talks about the need to provide information in your response that will help the appropriate tracing request be considered. And in the case of a trading partner making that request on its own behalf, it can only initiate that in the case of a suspect product investigation. But it's interesting to note that the language does not specifically say in E that you are to provide the TI and the TS, as it does when a regulator makes that request. When an ATP makes the request, it says you should provide information that will help facilitate the gathering. I think there's some clarity needed by the FDA as to the differences between D&E and the differences between making a response to the FDA or any other regulator under the Section D versus making a response to an authorized trading partner under Section E. This gets further complicated because as a wholesale distributor, we're also subject not only to those two sections that talk about transaction information and transaction statements and facilitating gathering, but we're subject to another section relating to this, which is 582 C1A V3, or V2, I'm sorry. That's a long one. But this section has a prohibition on what a distributor can do with TI and TS and who they can share that with. This specific section says that a distributor is prohibited from sharing this information with anyone except a government official unless they're taking and doing a suspect product investigation. So we need some clarity around that distinction. This distinction clause does not appear in any other section of the DSCSA. It is not repeated in the manufacturer section. It is not repeated in the repackager section or in the dispenser section, but specifically for distributors, there is this clause that provides requirement that distributors hold this information confidential and not share it unless they're doing the exchange of TITS with a purchasing trading partner. Further, since 582 G1E says to provide information, there is an avenue for us to be able to meet both that section and the section that requires protection of the original TI and the TS by allowing us to be able to redact some of the information and be able to hold some of the confidential data a little bit closer to the chest. So in addition to the comments you heard earlier from Mary Ann speaking on behalf of Cardinal about the need for the enforcement or the validation, if you will, that EPCIS is the only standard, we would again ask as McKesson that you endorse EPCIS as the only standard to meet the interoperable exchange of data. We would ask that you clarify specifically the confidentiality requirements as they apply to distributors and what the expectations are for the FDA that they will be followed. I know it's mentioned in the EDDS guidance about confidentiality. It was mentioned in the presentation a little bit earlier today, but I think there's some clarity that we need to have as to how this section relates to the tracing section when a request is made by an ATTP. We would ask that you thoroughly explain and hopefully endorse our interpretation of the difference between Section D and Section E, specifically the difference between a regulator making a request and another authorized trading partner making a request for tracing information. Conceptually, there's a lot of protected consumer information in the TI. You have the names and addresses of all the trading partners that somebody may be doing business with. This is very sensitive information in many cases. So the need to make sure it's not being used inappropriately or beyond the confines of the law is something that we have to protect. And finally, as Mary Ann mentioned just a minute ago, one of the things we would also ask is that you urge or reiterate very clearly that when a selling trading partner issues TI, it needs to include all the product identifiers that are included in that particular transaction. In the EDDS guidance, there was some discussion around the use of portals, perhaps to contain the internal product identifiers of aggregated product. And that would lead to a situation where the TI did not fully represent all the product identifiers in a transaction, which is contrary to the law. So we would ask for some clarification there as well. On behalf of McKesson, I would like to thank the FDA for the opportunity to provide comments today. We look forward to any questions you may have coming up in the upcoming Q&A session, and also to continuing our partnership with the FDA to promote a secure supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. With that, we'll turn it over to Brad Pine with Smith Drug.
Thanks, Dan, and good to see you. It's been a while. My name's Brad Pine, and I am Vice President of Brand, Pharma, and Regulatory at Smith Drug Company. Smith Drug Company has been in business since 1943 and is headquartered in South Carolina. We are considered a regional full-line wholesaler and currently have 5 distribution centers throughout the eastern 2/3 of the United States. Our primary business is independent drugstores and independent long-term care pharmacies. Our customers service a broad market from large cities to rural areas. We need to assure rural area dispensers remain viable to assure remote patient access to medications, and regional wholesalers are an important part of this supply network. As a regional wholesaler, EPCIS onboarding and implementation puts us behind the big 3. The positive of this is that most of the bumps have already been vetted by the big 3 as far as getting set up. The negative is that it takes us just as much time to onboard a manufacturer on EPCIS standards as the big 3, but with less technical resources, i.e. employees to get the work done. My guess we are not alone as a direct purchasing regional wholesaler. HDA has 34 members beyond the big 3, and all of us must be ready to receive and send TITS with product identifiers in November of 23. We'd like to have all upstream trading partners vetted and ready by late 2022. This will help to minimize issues of not having PI information for products going out the door come 2023. Our VRS readiness is we are fully operational in a production environment. We have 184 customer or vendors that have responded with full or partial master data. And we are currently doing VRS verifications with products we know that have master data, and the manufacturer's VRS is up and running. Where we are for DSCSA serialization implementation in November of 23. Currently, Smith's readiness is that we have 32 EPCIS connections requested with manufacturers. 28 of these are in progress at some level. 9 so far have had missing information such as certificates or master data, and 13 are in a production environment and ready to go, and 8 of these have exchanged data. As mentioned by Mary Ann with Cardinal, they have 42, we have 8. So, we have a long way to go. We have over 320 manufacturers to sign up, and it takes us 4 to 6 weeks to onboard a vendor. This includes vetting the master data and assuring EPCIS compatibility connections are made with each manufacturer. Simple math is we have 104 weeks to set up 300 manufacturers, or three per week. Sadly, this math doesn't compute. With many manufacturers delaying setup until the last minute, we fear we'll simply run out of manpower to get the job done. Smith Drug is currently able to receive EPCIS compatible events using GS1 EPCIS version 1.2 through our service provider. We are finalizing upgrades to the ERP system so we can capture and include relevant EPCIS data for both receiving and shipping events with complete TITS information. We're expecting this availability come 1Q22. We'll achieve interoperability using a direct purchase decentralized model. In other words, we'll receive secure confidential TITS from upstream selling partners and will likewise pass secured confidential TITS to downstream trading partners, i.e. the pharmacy or dispenser. HDA wholesale members will require the upstream selling partner to send us the EPCIS shipping events in their entirety. These events will list all the product identifiers for all packages, as well as the homogeneous case identifiers. We believe this transfer of data follows the manufacturer packager requirement to provide the TITS transactions prior to or at the time of transfer of ownership. Upon transfer of ownership to a downstream trading partner, Smith Drug will maintain the required TITS that can be accessed by the dispensers either through an EPCIS event or through a secure Smith Drug portal. If there is a request for information from the FDA or other authorized federal or state entity for facilitating a suspect or illegitimate product investigation, the agency can request its confidential information via direct communication to Smith Drug Company. Now I want to touch upon aggregation, inference, and reconciliation. We use reconciliation during ship out process, and we'll use aggregation and inference upon receiving of products. Smith Drug receives approximately 70,000 units of product each day. This equates to over 4,000 sealed homogeneous cases. With this type of volume, it is infeasible to open cases and reconcile to each level. Instead, we will infer contents of the cases as contemplated by FDA's 2021 draft guidance. Additional reasons for use of inference are as noted. Currently, the receiving area of our warehouse is about 5% of available space. This space would have to be expanded and considerably and upfitted to accommodate a by units receiving process. Distribution centers are designed around point of picking reconciliation, not at receiving. Also, most warehouses are already at capacity levels and we simply don't have the space. If we break open sealed homogeneous cases during receipt, we'll no longer have sealed cases to ship. So the outbound shipment of cases as contemplated in DSCSA would cease to exist. Manpower is also an issue. We currently believe we'll need to increase staff 10 to 15% to capture the PI information as noted by Mary Ann with Cardinal on outbound shipment. During inbound, if we did this during inbound, it would double that quantity of people we would need. Warehouse staffing is also already suffering because of COVID, and hiring new staff is extremely difficult. Ask any HR person trying to staff warehouse employees at any business, let alone a pharma warehouse with heightened security and background check for employees. Then there is DSCSA implementation, which will require highly technical aspects of many of the jobs. Throwing warm bodies with little to no experience will simply not help matters. During receipt of product, we'll use 3 methods. If it is less than a full case, the PI will be scanned and reconciled. If it is a sealed homogeneous case, the case identifier will be scanned and the eaches of the case will be inferred and verified that they are there through the parent-child aggregation event. Another important part of inference will be for pallets containing multiple homogeneous cases of the same NDC or G10. The June 2021 guidance contemplates pallet receipt and has FDA approval. This is especially important for national distribution centers that receive truckloads of multiple pallets each day. The current plan is to inspect the pallet to ensure the pallet's integrity has not been compromised, and then scan the GS1 SSCC pallet label to infer that what cases are received and the corresponding aggregated PI. Upon outbound, when shipping out packages, i.e. the smallest selling unit, the PI will be scanned prior to shipment and reconciled with our internal repository prior to sending to a dispenser. If full cases are shipped, the case identifier will be scanned and verified against the internal repository prior to shipment. The case parent-child aggregation data will be sent to the purchasing trading partner. Reconciliation is made through this double check process. If the PI does not match up, it doesn't ship, and the product will be quarantined for further investigation with the manufacturer. This assures that only validated products are going to dispensers. Inbound reconciliation is duplicative to this outbound process. Smith Drug recommendations. We implore FDA to communicate the urgency with a notification to manufacturers about their obligations under the DSCSA and their duty to connect with trading partners well before the 2023 deadline. This includes master data, testing, and moving to production environments. While many manufacturers are engaged, my concern is there are just as many that are not. Reasons for non-engagement vary, but likely cost of implementation and lack of understanding of the responsibilities are the biggest hurdles. If the FDA were to send these notices to manufacturers, they will be taken seriously and will get the attention of management. Point out They need to have systems and IT infrastructure to send TITS via the only internationally recognized standard currently available, which is GS1's EPCIS version 1.2. The EPCIS events must include a complete set of TI, including the case product identifiers, the PI for all individual selling units in the shipment prior to hitting the warehouse docks of the wholesalers, as required in 582 G1B. Direct purchase wholesalers will not contemplate lookup methods for data access or retrieval. Only EPCIS events will be acceptable. Aggregation and inference are allowed for both cases and pallets as noted in the June 2021 draft guidance. Thank you, and this concludes my presentation.
Great, thanks, Brad. With that, we're going to go to the FDA panel again for any questions they might have for the last group of speakers.
Great, thank you, speakers. Good to see you today, and thanks for your comments. I will start with the first, and then I think we might have a few more from the FDA panel. We tried, recognizing that there is some room for interpretation in the current draft guidance on enhanced drug distribution security at the package level. We have tried to provide some clarification today and even in some other recent presentations in terms of some of the concepts that are described in the draft guidance. So this is directed mostly, I think, to Anita at HDA. But do you intend to revise some of your comments based on some of the clarifications that we've provided, particularly today, but also in some recent presentations and webinars on some of their issues that you've raised today and in your comments to the draft guidance?
Yeah,
we have tried to clarify. We have tried to clarify a few things in terms of, giving sort of examples of what we envision for how FDA may submit a request or how an authorized trading partner may submit a request, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah, Connie, first, thanks for the question. Yeah, we're going to be looking very, very closely at today's meeting and go back and review it with our members. We are certainly going to take the statements made under advisement and make that determination. It's a little bit early for me to say exactly how that will come out, because we must review it with all of our members and so forth and make sure that we have a consensus view of it. But we will certainly take a very close look at what has been said and the clarifications that have been offered so far.
Great, thank you. And then I'll open it up to the FDA panel. I think, Christine, you have another question? Might be on mute. Okay, while Christina is trying to get audio, I'll ask my panel for another question. Anita from CBER, Anita Richardson from CBER, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Connie. Yeah, I wanted to ask Brad Pine if you could say more about manufacturers who are not engaged, and in particular, whether you see that in certain segments of industry.
Yeah, well, basically, as I was showing you, we've had, like with VRS, we've had 180 of the 320 manufacturers send us some response in master data. So that means there's 140 of them that didn't respond to even getting this master data. Now, that said, they might not be participating in VRS, so they think that they didn't have to send that. And then for EPCIS, as noted by all of us, I think that manufacturers just aren't engaging. And I think a lot of it has to do with cost. But for us, it's really a matter of time and effort. And even as we've all said, it's a 4 to 6 to even 8 week, maybe even a longer process to set up each manufacturer. So, currently, I think we have 38 that have responded out of 320 to our request to even start setup process. So our concern is these manufacturers just aren't engaged. And I think some of them, and you can ask the others, some of them just don't even respond when you're asking them the questions. So really what happens in the real world is when you guys send out a letter to a manufacturer, it goes down the hallway. Trust me, it's going from council to the manufacturers to make things work. And I think that it doesn't have to be necessarily prescriptive, but it needs to be somewhat descriptive in telling them, get the lead out. Thanks.
If I could jump in, I think some manufacturers, when enforcement discretion was issued last October, paused a little bit. And so, encouraging them to continue with their efforts is important. Also, to be fair, some have made the decision not to aggregate on their packaging lines immediately. So they're building that into their process. And it's very difficult, as I think we've all kind of said, to send serialized data if you're not aggregating, because you want to just scan that case and not open it up and scan all the individual units in it. And I think the third thing that Brad mentioned is the cost, because it is more expensive to scan on outbound in order to allow them to send that serialized data.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing to this too. I cringe a little bit when the comment is questioning whether manufacturers, all of them, are not engaged, and I don't think that's a fair or valid representation. Much like the other segments that are going through DSCSA implementation, there are many, including probably most everyone that's on this call as a manufacturer, who are very heavily engaged, and they're in the work groups and they're at the table having discussions, much like the distributors that are on this call are engaged, and much like the dispensers are. But in each of those three communities, there is still a large group that is kind of just sitting there waiting for somebody to come along and tell them how to do it, what to do, and when to do. And I think as distributors, part of what we've tried to do individually is each of us has tried to explain our expectations to our suppliers of what we expect to see, when we expect to see it, and timelines. And it's not to see typically DSCSA data coming to us in serialized form by November of 2023. It's to see it at a point earlier, as was mentioned in Dave's presentation, to start seeing that serialized data significantly earlier, typically somewhere between November of 22 and February of 23, depending upon which wholesale you're talking about. So we can go through that data quality, data purity exercise and clean up everything before we have to rely on it. But there are some out there who just have not yet engaged, and some of them have two products. Some of them might be located overseas. There's a variety of reasons for it.
Yeah, if I miscommunicated, I apologize, because I know most manufacturers are engaged.
Great, thank you. In the last couple minutes, I'm going to ask the question on behalf of my colleague who's having some audio issues. This is from Christine Hunt from our Office of Chief Counsel. When you do the outbound scanning, what determines how long that process takes? Does it have to do with the variety of products, the size of the cases, the quantity of cases, et cetera? It could go to any of you, or each of you could address if you would like.
Scott, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. And much like Marianne and Brad mentioned, we've also done time studies, and we've come to a very similar conclusion. We've actually done engineering studies where they've observed the people scanning product, and we've mocked this up. But it is about about a 2 or 3 second event per product that we have to scan. And when you add up that time for the volumes of product that we process, it winds up being in that particular situation somewhere around a 12% increase in labor costs for picking. We have looked at different places and ways to do scanning. Some of our products are picked by robotic machines that put the product on a belt, and as it goes down to the end of the belt, we have arranged automated scanners to read that product as it passes by. But in places where the product is picked by hand from the shelf, today they may go to that location and scan the shelf tag to say they're in the right spot. In the future world, they go to that location and they have to scan each of the products as they pick them. So if they pick 3 bottles, it's 3 scans, whereas today there may have only been 1, as an example. All of that adds up to that incremental amount of time. In the scan itself, when it's scanned, there's also a little bit of a hesitancy because we go back and look to see, do we have incoming TI for this particular serial number, to make sure we check that before we sell the product. If we can't find in that very brief period of time that incoming TI, that product goes to quarantine, is investigated to figure out what's going on with it. But only product that's been scanned and matched to the incoming TI is allowed to go out and sell.
Yeah, and we do a little bit differently. We have a QA, quality assurance scanning that we do right now for all pharmaceutical products. And then we're going to have to retrofit those with new scanners and stuff. But to Scott's point, it's really hard to do just to hit that 2D barcode, because there's other barcodes on there and things like that. So you really have an employee, and he's holding that kind of that bottle, and he's making sure, okay, well, that's the only thing I got to hit. And that's a big part of that lag time too. So it's just the teaching and stuff like that. But I would venture to say at least 2 to 3 seconds easily. Versus right now, it takes 1/10 of a second. They hit that UPC barcode, bang, it's gone. Bang, bang, bang.
Great, thank you. Mary Ann, did you have anything to add to that? Or
No, I think, Scott explained it quite well. Today they might scan 1 barcode and pick 12 units, and now they're going to have to scan all 12 units to capture those individual serial numbers.
Great. Okay, well, we're a little bit over time, so just one last somewhat of a comment, but if you want to add anything to it, it was, I think it was Scott who reiterated about some of the provisions specific to wholesale distributors in terms of protecting confidential information. So, right, while that provision was not directly outlined in the recent draft guidance, it is the provision that's related to all trading partners' obligations is included in the current enhanced drug distribution security draft guidance, but certainly hearing your comments, so we'll take those into consideration. So thank you. Dan, I think that I'll turn it back over to you. That'll end our question session. And
Great. Thank you, Connie.
thank you.
Thank you to everyone for the questions and answers. And we're going to go into our lunch break now, which will be a full hour. So we'll give you that full hour and come back at 12:44 Eastern time. And if you want to and have not yet, during that break, this is your last chance to sign up for that open comments session at 3 o'clock today. So go ahead and do that if you're wanting to do that at 3. And with that, we'll go to lunch. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back from lunch, everyone. Hope you had a good break. If we're ready, let's get going with our next set of speakers. We've got Elisa Bernstein up from APhA, that's the American Pharmacists Association. Elisa, if you're ready, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to respond to your request related to the enhanced drug distribution security requirements. I'm Elisa Bernstein. I'm Senior Vice President of Pharmacy Practice and Government Affairs at the American Pharmacists Association. And APhA is the largest association representing pharmacists in all practice settings. And we've been working hard during the pandemic, and we know FDA has been in the spotlight working hard and under tremendous pressure during the pandemic. And we appreciate all that you and your colleagues are doing and holding this meeting. For those of you who don't know me, while working at FDA, and I worked at FDA for many decades, I was involved in discussions with Congress during passage of DSCSA and led efforts at FDA implementing DSCSA up until when I retired 2 years ago. And today, I'm going to be highlighting and embellishing on some of the issues raised in the comments that APhA submitted related to the EDDS guidance and answer the questions that you posed for this meeting. So if we can go to the next slide. And some of these are just general, I've categorized them. So first you asked how implementation of the enhanced requirements are progressing for our organization and challenges. And I'll answer generally regarding dispenser implementation. Quite frankly, although larger chains and health systems are well underway, most community pharmacies have not gotten started, and hospital and health systems also have made little to moderate progress. And there's two reasons why implementation is not further along. And I'll highlight these two. First, pharmacies have been in the front line during the pandemic, providing COVID testing, immunizations, therapies, symptomatic relief, in addition to all the other patient care services that they've been providing in communities. Additionally, healthcare ecosystem is providing financial strains on pharmacies, whether community, hospital and health system, long-term care or other. And it's a struggle, and pharmacies are focusing on keeping the doors open and addressing patient needs. The second reason is there are no final established standards or final guidance setting forth the requirements. Until there is some certainty, many dispensers, particularly independent community pharmacies, are reluctant to invest or consider what they'll do to meet the requirements. And many dispensers are relying or will rely on their wholesalers for hand-holding for implementation. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Next, you asked if the proposed recommendations in FDA's draft guidance are helpful to achieve compliance, and if not, what would be useful. So the next comments are going to address that question. So can you go to the next slide, please? As several prior speakers noted, there is no single system being developed, and the law does not require a system. As APHA's comments explained in detail, DSCSA requires individual trading partners to have systems and processes to comply with the provisions, and DSCSA specifically calls for requirements for enhanced drug distribution security. DSCSA does not require a system for enhanced drug distribution security. And so enhanced system is a misnomer, and using it implies that there's another level of integration or a specific place to share data that's needed in order to comply. What's being developed is business-to-business interoperability, not a centralized system or significant use of decentralized databases for interoperability. So yes, you're probably saying that I use the term enhanced system regularly when I was at FDA. Yes, true. That's what we envisioned, and that's what we thought trading partners would develop as the approach to implement the requirements. However, the supply chain went in another direction and has been focusing on the business-to-business interoperability, relying on EPCIS with their own individual systems. FDA needs to pivot too. The agency needs to focus on the requirements for the framework to ensure electronic interoperability from a business-to-business perspective, enabling a dispenser's own system to be able to talk and receive transaction information from any of their trading partner systems without having to have several ways of electronically talking with each trading partner. we can go to the next slide. If you want more unified compliance across the supply chain, keep it simple and stick with the basic DSCSA requirements. FDA should do their own analysis of current and predicted state of readiness by November 2023 across the supply chain. This will give you a better sense of reality and what to expect when November 2023 comes around. You may find that despite all our efforts across the supply chain, all the requirements or capabilities cannot be implemented in time without disrupting drug distribution and drug availability for patients. Consider a tiered approach to implement and reassess as symptoms, processes, and experience matures. The draft guidance contains bells and whistles and elements to further enhance supply chain security. We urge you to avoid imposing standards or features that may well enhance drug distribution security, but are not required in the law. The next slide, please. The draft guidance describes steps for reconciliation by dispensers that aren't practical. The draft calls for automated reconciliation, reconciling each product package with transaction documentation, and automatically uploading information into their system. And in most pharmacies, current systems, processes, and resources won't support these steps. And if a pharmacy chooses to partner with their wholesaler or a third party to store the transaction documentation, the systems aren't set up to routinely reconcile each product package automatically, quickly, or efficiently. Yeah, pharmacies do check inbound orders and may read the barcodes, sometimes a linear barcode, sometimes the 2D barcode, but it's connected to their inventory database in many situations and not where the transaction documentation is held or will be held. We recommend that FDA consider establishing a risk-based approach to reconciliation and verification that's based on whether there is a reason to believe that a product may be suspect or illegitimate, integrating some of the elements in FDA's guidance on identifying suspect product. If the next slide, please. Finally, you asked where there are areas where FDA could provide more clarity. The next slide. The draft guidance says that interoperable integration of individual systems should allow appropriate access for FDA and other officials to communicate with trading partners' individual systems. It's unclear what this means, and other speakers mentioned this. I doubt that FDA intends this to mean that they want to reach into trading partner systems, but that's what it sounds like, so please clarify. DSCSA requires trading partners to provide applicable transaction information, including that which facilitates the gathering of transaction information going back to the manufacturer. Facilitates the gathering is an awkward phrase, and it's been troubling nonetheless through the many years trying to figure out what it means. What it means and what trading partners needs to do, though, was not sufficiently described in the draft guidance. Please clarify this and maybe provide some examples. The draft guidance also sets forth a 3-day time frame for resolving clerical or data errors. This is not reasonable and could impact patient care. Resolution of the error is oftentimes out of the dispenser's control while they wait for information from the seller. Instead of a predetermined time limit, FDA should clarify by developing criteria for when it would be appropriate for products subject to data or clerical errors to be dispensed. The draft guidance has unreasonable expectations for handling alerts. Individual systems are not capable of storing and creating red flags for products subject to an alert. That said, there is a large gap and disconnect between FDA and the supply chain regarding alerts of illegitimate product. This is a supply chain blind spot. There has to be a better way to quickly and efficiently widely share alerts across the supply chain, ensure that this information gets into the right hands for appropriate urgent action. Press releases don't work. FDA should explore how alerts can be communicated in a more systematic and reliable way without imposing new costs for technologies, hardware, or software on trading partners. And then the last slide, please. Finally, as mentioned by other speakers, we recommend that FDA hold a focused DSCSA workshop for dispensers, but it should be when the time is right and the messages are clear and specific. Holding this too early will only provide more confusion. Additionally, the dispenser small business study that is required by DSCSA will be critical. APhA and others in the pharmacy community welcomes the opportunity to provide input in the focus and design of this study so it delivers adequate data and information for dispenser implementation and compliance. Thank you again for holding this meeting, and APhA looks forward to continuing to work with FDA on DSCSA implementation.
Great, thank you, Elisa. Let's keep going, and next we've got Michelle Davidson from Walgreens.
Thank you. I am Michelle Davidson, the Senior Manager of Pharmacy Technical Standards, Policy and Development at Walgreens. And I would like to thank the FDA for the opportunity to present the following comments through this virtual forum regarding the implementation of enhanced drug distribution security at the package level under the DSCSA. Next slide, please. I know everyone is familiar with Walgreens, but I want you to look at the organization from my perspective. And that is that we have over 9,000 stores nationwide with 250,000 employees, approximately 26,000 of those whom are pharmacists. So our job is to ensure that all of our employees are knowledgeable about the policies included in the DSCSA to ensure that we have that consistent patient experience in each of our stores. Next slide. So now let's talk about enhanced product verification and tracing. While IT resources have been challenging during COVID-19 and other priorities, we still appear to be on track for the meeting of the enhanced deadline of November 2023. We receive over 1.5 million individual saleable units daily, so we rely heavily on aggregation and inference. Products received are confirmed as they come into our pharmacy. That is where individual shipping containers are scanned and aggregated data is ingested into our inventory management system, detailing the contents of the individual shipping container. Pharmacy team members currently perform sample auditing to identify any potential overages or shortages. This allows us to ensure accuracy of the inventory since all shipping containers are sealed and securely wrapped when received from our authorized trading partners. We have concerns with needing to scan each individual saleable unit receipt because of the potential workflow impacts. Our concern is there will be significant amount of labor required that may impact patient care without the use of aggregation or inference for non-homogeneous shipping containers. Next slide. The good news is that we are seeing improvements in trading partner readiness. We applaud the efforts of the FDA in highlighting issues and providing guidance to the industry regarding the 2D barcode. We are happy to report that we are now seeing improvement in quality of 2D barcodes, and we are looking to start piloting with electronic serialized data from our trading partners in the near future. Enhanced verification appears to be on target as the industry has developed a verification router service network to verify product identifiers in manufacturers and repackagers. While some manufacturers and repackagers have not implemented a verification router service, this is a solution that has been in development for many years within the industry. However, gathering tracing documentation does not have a similar interoperable solution, which is a concern. While there are groups such as the Partnership for DSCSA Governance, they are drafting requirements for a solution. We want to voice that there is a need to streamline the gathering product tracing information. Emails and web portals are not an efficient method of obtaining product tracing information. We need an industry-wide electronic solution to efficiently gather and respond to product tracing requests within the required timeframes. Such a solution is not available at this time and would require more industry collaboration for development in order to meet the 2023 deadline. Next slide. So let's take a minute to talk about the patient. DSCSA was designed to enhance the security of the prescription drug supply chain and help protect patients from receiving illegitimate products. Our goal is to ensure the patient receives legitimate products by ensuring our compliance with the DSCSA. We also want to ensure the patients do not experience any delays in obtaining their medication. That's why inference and aggregation is critical. It allows us to streamline current processes while ensuring integrity of the medication. We must be able to verify exceptions quickly and efficiently through real-time data exchange, not portals, not emails, in order to avoid unnecessary delays in providing patient care. When delays happen, we need to provide our patients with a consistent message that portrays Walgreens as a trusted partner within the supply chain. The message should resonate with the patient and be one that is universally communicated throughout the dispenser community. Next slide. There are several areas of concern as we move forward with compliance of the 2023 requirements. First is aggregation. What role will aggregation and inference play, if any, when pharmacists receive non-homogeneous, securely sealed shipping containers from an authorized trading partner? Then there's exceptions. We must be able to exchange product tracing data within the supply chain efficiently and quickly. We are voicing the need for industry collaboration and ample time to test prior to the 2023 deadline. Unnecessary clerical errors may result in delays to patient care and impact patient safety. And tracing. Interoperable systems to gather electronic tracing information going back to the manufacturer are not currently in place. We rely on manual processes such as web portals and emails to gather and exchange the requested tracing information, which is not efficient to meet the required deadlines. And finally, there's the timeline. The industry may need additional time depending on the answers to these questions. Workflow may need to be altered, and additional systems may need to be developed. Therefore, we need additional guidance from the FDA to help ensure industry readiness for the 2023 deadline without negatively impacting patient care. Next slide. Which brings me to the specific areas in which we request additional guidance and clarification from the FDA. Aggregation and inference. Current guidance references homogeneous cases or pallets. These are received at our distributor, not in our pharmacies. We need the ability to use aggregation and inference on non-homogeneous shipping containers that is securely sealed from our distributors. We feel that inference of non-homogeneous shipping containers can be used effectively as long as aggregated data is received and audit processes are in place without needing to scan each individual saleable unit. We also have several questions regarding dispenser expectations. When we receive inquiries from the FDA, will we need to trace the product through the supply chain back to the manufacturer? Who is responsible for gathering the tracing documentation going back to the manufacturer without the transaction history? Will the FDA go to each trading partner involved? Or will the trading partner who received the request be required to go to each trading partner and gather the tracing documentation on behalf of the requester? Or will the dispenser provide their tracing documentation and forward on the request to the proper trading partner? The industry needs clarification to understand the expectations of the FDA. And finally, we respectfully request assistance from the FDA on guidance for the pharmacist. What message should be communicated with the patient when experiencing delays due to additional compliance requirements? CMS often provides such guidance to pharmacies and pharmacists when implementing new programs to ensure consistency throughout the industry. We are requesting that the FDA do the same. Next slide. I would like to thank the FDA for the opportunity to present our concerns, and we look forward to continuing working with the industry towards a smooth implementation of the EDDS. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And with that, we're going to turn it back over to the FDA panel for any questions for the previous speakers.
Good afternoon. Thank you, panelists, for providing those comments. I think I do have a question related to, I believe both commenters mentioned aggregation and inference, and specifically in terms of inferring from the non-homogeneous cases. I think, Michelle, you mentioned some auditing, but are there other steps that dispensers can take to confirm or check that the products that they received are indeed what they were supposed to receive prior to dispensing?
So we receive all the electronic information on what's in the totes, and we take the we do random audits to ensure that we are within specific requirements. If we start to find errors, Connie, then we'll turn around and we will require more scanning of the individual items. But things like controlled substance, we always scan each and every single one of them. But you also have to realize that throughout the filling process, these products are scanned multiple times. So we feel that scanning them right when they come in the pharmacy is unnecessary because of the fact that we do scan the outside of the tote. And you have to remember, our wholesalers are doing the same, right? So it's just redundant work.
Thank you. Adding on to that, other stakeholders have mentioned data integrity issues. So how do dispensers feel about ensuring data integrity, across all levels? So it wouldn't just be on the manufacturer, it would basically apply to everybody else in the supply chain.
Yeah, and that is a big concern because it's the clerical errors, I think, that are going to hang us up. And I believe the previous speaker also talked about that. Dr. Bernstein said that the clerical errors, we can't wait 3 days for those to be cleared up. And the fact that a lot of those we have to verify right now with portals and emails, that's just not an effective and efficient system, because pharmacy is a real-time environment and we need real-time data. We need a system to be able to provide that data in real time where the pharmacies can get that and clear up those errors right away. And that is really what's lacking right now.
Yeah, Connie, in response to your question regarding inference, and I think it goes to the data integrity question as well. You know, once a homogeneous case is opened or broken down, we believe, at least in what we put in our comments, that the trading partner who owns the product should not further infer the information or the data about those lower level packages onto the next partner, because it's open, a breach can happen. And so that creates a question with respect to the integrity of the data and the products that the next, particularly a dispenser, may be getting. So I think there's definitely an interrelationship there, that as you're looking to the guidance that you're providing, the guidance did not say when inference should cease. So it's something that I think you could clarify. with respect to how far inference can be taken in the supply chain.
Thank you. I'm going to just check here and just see if there's any other questions from the FDA panel. And while they're thinking, do you want to, yes, recognize the comments related to dispenser, specifically dispenser expectations and requirements, and there will be a study related to the assessment of small dispensers in the future. So just keep an eye out for that information, and we'll look to working with various trading partners and stakeholders when that timing is right. And it looks like we don't have any more questions. So Dan, I think we can move back onto the agenda.
Okay, great. Thanks, Connie. My agenda says we have another break. Is that still true? I believe so. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna go to a lengthy break, longer break here. By my count, we're gonna start. If we start the break now, I believe we are doing a 40-minute break to give folks kind of a longer afternoon break. So we'll come back at 1:54. And then we'll have our last panel before we go to more questions from the FDA and then the open comments